Good afternoon. This is John Majori with MajoriOnBowie.com. I'm here today with my very first video interview. And for our first interview, I have quite a guest, Professor Simon Critchley of the New School, noted philosopher, author of many books on topics ranging from philosophy to soccer to David Bowie, presence on all forms of media, from podcasts to interview shows. He was the co-editor of a New York Times column on philosophy called The Stone. He's been guests on other people's shows. He appears in magazines. He's even the co-founder of a band, Critchley and Simmons. If you could think of a way that a human being can express himself, Simon Critchley has done it. You probably have him on your bookshelf, even if you don't recognize the name. And there's a good chance you recognize the name. So as this was my first video interview, as you might imagine, I ran into a few technical challenges. And the very beginning of the interview was a little garbled. So I'm re-recording the beginning now, and you'll notice that I'm wearing something different than when I actually was talking to Professor Critchley. But I chopped off the beginning of the original video, and we're going to start right after I asked him about his observations about David Bowie's embrace of artifice and rejection of authenticity.
I should note that Merriam-Webster's word of the year in 2023 was authenticity. And so there is a kind of, I think, a pandemic of authenticity out there. And the idea that whatever one says or does as a writer or a musician or a politician has to be backed up by some claim to one's own integrity, that one kind of adds up to one thing with a name, and that's usually then justified by a backstory. I am, and then you get a list of identity predicates which are meant to justify that claim to authenticity. And I think that stinks, and I think it's not what Bowie was doing, and it's not what we should be doing. We should be trying to push ourselves out of the way as much as possible to make open space for something genuinely interesting to happen. So I find this culture of authenticity really fatuous and reductive, and it doesn't actually explain something like music or something like Bowie. And Bowie is someone who is exploited the inauthenticity of what he was doing by deploying a whole series of images and personae that he worked through. And so Bowie is all artifice, and you can find that all the way back to Hunky Dory, that track, Andy Warhol, Silver Screen, Can't Tell Them Apart at All. I think that's where someone like Bowie comes in, and it's that blurring of truth and falsehood and so Bowie as an artist is someone who explores and exploits layers and layers of artifice and inauthenticity. Who knows who he was ultimately? It's remember the last track on the last album, Black Star, I can't give everything away, in a sense that who David Bowie was, it wasn't his name. His name was David Jones. And so in a sense, the whole thing is stylized, artificial, and that's fine. That's what art does, and that's what music does.
Did his the term fakery, right? You've used it himself.
Yeah.
It reveals something. It rips away the illusions of reality. I'm paraphrasing what you wrote.
Yeah.
To reveal what?
Well, nothing really. It could be, how the others must see a faker are much too fast to what's the line from Changes? How the others must see the faker, how much too fast to take that something.
Okay.
And it's Bowie was was a faker in that sense.
Yeah.
In Hunky Dory, he's faking Bob Dylan, he's faking a whole number of different things. But um he's I think certainly in the 70s in particular, he's much too fast. He's moving really quickly
Yeah.
from thing to thing, and that's what makes that work between say 69 and 1980 so fascinating. He's taking on forms, using them, abandoning them, and by the time anybody's caught up with him, he's moved on to the next thing. And yeah, and it's so, I mean, fakery sounds a bit pejorative, but I mean it in the nicest possible sense, in the sense that Bowie's work is a it's cinematic. It's a scenography. It's a stage. And what does that reveal? Well, I mean, one thing that I tried to track through Bowie's work in the book, and was this word nothing, which
Right.
keeps coming up. In many ways, it ties together his a lot of his songs, in a sense that what's revealed is nothing, as nothing, which is kind of an active, creative nothing, which is revealed when all of the stuff has been pulled away. So it's certainly not some higher truth or any sort of substantial truth that's revealed by Bowie's music. It's a kind of a movement with nothingness, which we can make that journey with him, and we can follow him on that way. So I think there's a kind of in philosophical terms, he is someone who is exploring the theme of nothing, of nihilism in his work, and the music is a kind of imaginative counterthrust to that, which doesn't put anything in its place, but which gives us the music that we can find ourselves in, something like that.
Is Bowie's nothing a something, or does he really mean the absence of anything? Hold on to nothing and it won't let you down.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think certainly in the early work, I think he means really nothing. I mean,
Yeah.
hold on to that. And it's also linked to, I mean, not in a way that is causal, but it's linked to the social context that Bowie's music gains popularity within, in the sense that everything that had been revealed, say, by the 1960s, by the early 70s, and in particular in somewhere like Britain, had been revealed to be nothing. And Bowie, in a sense, is there's a kind of joyful tearing down of the illusions of 60s radicalism, which comes out in a tune like All the Young Dudes, and my brother back at home with his Beatles and his Stones. I never got
Yeah.
off on that revolution stuff. What a drag, too many snags. So there is a way in which his music, connects with that social context of the early 70s, which was deeply nihilistic, particularly somewhere like Britain, where everything had really fallen through the floor certainly by 1974, but it was already underway in the early 70s. And he gives a kind of soundtrack to that, I think.
Yeah. He touched on that concept even earlier with Memory of a Free Festival, which is sort
Yeah,
of a critique of the 60s before the 60s were over.
yeah. It's a great track. It's never been one of my in my favorite tracks, but I did an event with a yoga expert called Eddie Stern, and we did that was last year, I think, at the anniversary of Bowie's birth and death, and he played that, and we listened to it on good speakers, and it is an extraordinary piece of music. I mean, Bowie was, you know, in the late 60s or throughout the 60s, you can see him trying to find something, um, as a songwriter. And also I fundamentally think of him as a songwriter, as someone who wrote tunes. And I take seriously Bowie's own doubts about his own voice. That
Yeah.
Bowie didn't think he really had the chops to sing, and because his voice was thin and raspy, but he could write songs. And also, I don't really, you know, what we talk about with Bowie is always how he looked, the images, the changes, one Bowie, the shifting through, and that's all great. And but in a sense, for me, Bowie is fundamentally a studio artist, is someone who wrote songs and recorded them, and that's where the magic happens. I mean, would it have really mattered if he'd have looked significantly different than how he did? I don't know. I mean, I think I think there's a risk of reducing Bowie to his image and his images, and there are plenty of examples of that in Bowie's time and after. But what Bowie had were just really good songs,
Yeah.
and with fantastic lyrics, and that was his craft. That was his genius. It seems to me.
No, I started liking David Bowie because I liked how his music sounded, and I
Yeah.
think the lyrics and the words and the connections sort of kept me there.
What was
But
your way in?
um,
And when was your way in?
so I'm 55, and
Hmm.
I saw the Glass Spider tour in Toronto
Oh,
when
wow.
I was 20, which is almost fortuitous that that was my first Bowie concert because it was spectacular, but at the same time, I was 18, I wasn't 20. At the same time, every one that I would see after that was better.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That's what they say about the Glass Spider tour, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, but but I liked it. I really liked this guy, and I started listening to more of his music. And actually,
Hmm.
one of the things that I have been thinking about these days is, in many respects, his best known music really sort of ended by that point. But he
Yeah.
has such a deep, um, treasure chest of music that he made subsequently. We're talking about Nothing. I'm thinking about Heathen.
Yes.
Nothing remains. Nothing has changed. Everything has changed.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so, or The Next Day, which it's taken me 10 years to really, of listening to over and over again to really begin to appreciate.
Hmm.
Um, why is that? Why was there that shift between the greatest hits and maybe a deeper type of music that not everybody knows?
Yeah, I don't know. It's I mean, the thing about Bowie is that he obviously between 69 and 80, there's what, 13 albums or however many there are, and an extraordinary kind of uh creative vortex of material. And then there's the pause, the dispute with the label. Then we get the Let's Dance album, which was a hit. Um, and then we get sort of decline um, in albums like Tonight, and then he ends up doing these often covers of Iggy songs that I tend to prefer in the Iggy Pop original. And then he's also making movies, and so there's a whole. I discovered when Bowie died that the whole generation of people younger than me for whom Bowie was that guy in Labyrinth. And the acting, well, we could talk about that. But the thing is that the he comes back, and for me it was I remember, I mean, I listened to everything, and I kept up with what was happening. But when One Outside came out in 1995, I think, I remember
95.
listening to that on a cassette player in Stockholm, and then thinking, oh, he's he's getting it back.
Yeah.
It's happening again. And he clearly made an extraordinary effort to recover some of the intensity he had in the 1970s. So Bowie I can't think of really many other musicians that do that, that have this extraordinary period, which lasts for a long time. And then there's a fading away, there's fame, and then he slowly comes back. And then I think that the series of albums from in the mid 90s through to Heathen, and I think also Reality, are full of fascinating, wonderful things. And then we get the 10-year break, and then we get The Next Day, and then another break, and then we get Black Star. And it just seems that, in a sense, that I don't think it's the proof of Bowie's importance that he lasted such a long time, but I think it's really something, because
Yeah.
most great acts, have got a few albums in them, and then they die at 27, or they just run out of steam. But Bowie had the intelligence and the wherewithal to keep moving and keep developing. And also, I think that the extraordinary thing, I think, now is that that Bowie for me was really for me. I knew a lot of other Bowie fans, but it was by no means a widespread appeal. It always felt uh, quite marginal in a way, not very, but quite marginal. And then, I think since his death, I mean, the sense in which the reverence in which he's now held, I think is extraordinary, and perhaps itself a bit problematic in the sense that it blots out other things from that period which we should be also listening to. So Bowie, not that Bowie's become too important, but in a sense that Bowie has really, co-opted the last 50 years, and and that's great. That was kind of what I was arguing for in the book when I started writing it, which was around 2013, 2014. Initially, it was to basically argue that Bowie was the most important artist of the last 50 years, which at that time seemed like a fairly crazy thing to say. It doesn't seem like just a crazy thing
Yeah.
to say now, and that shift is interesting to me, and welcome. But then we also have to go back and find other things uh, from Bowie's time that are also really worth listening to and paying attention to.
Going back to your book, uh,
Mm,
uh, there was a chapter that was turned into an article in a magazine that I remembered from the year that he died. It was um, excerpted, and it focused on this idea of artifice.
yeah,
And it mentioned this, you mentioned it earlier, the concept of acting in your own movie that
yeah.
came up over and over and over again. And this popped back into my head sometime last year when I was reading something about Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went to your book, over and over again, there are these phenomena that you're associating with Bowie. Reality is relative. You
Yeah,
don't you don't fix a house that's uh, on the
it's
brink of
falling off a
falling
cliff.
cliff.
Yeah.
And it's almost like it's the Trump is Bowie's evil twin. Or am I misreading that?
Uh,
He's
I
playing the
don't
part.
know. I think it's
He's playing the
interesting.
part of a dictator, right? He's
Yeah,
yeah,
which Bowie, arguably did in 1975 or 76, when he turned up at Victoria Station
yeah,
and waved to his fans, and it was
yeah,
interpreted as a Nazi salute. And then he made some rather saucy remarks about Britain needs a dictator to organize things. And there's something of that in Bowie, and the politics of Bowie's of the Bowie had. I mean, um, are quite interesting and need to be unraveled. But I'll tell you a funny story, which is that the in January 2021, or let's say over Christmas 2021, so we're still deep in the pandemic. And I was talking to my editor at the New York Times, who's a good friend of mine. were probably having a drink, and I thought,
For the
what about
Stone.
a piece? Yeah, The Stone, with Peter Catapano, and I was thinking, well, what about a piece on Bowie? It's been 5 years since he died, and the tune 5 years, and there'd be a neat way of talking about that, and the idea being that the world has crumbled since Bowie died, and so I drafted that, and then I got some feedback on that draft, and I was finishing that, and I mentioned this because it was early in the morning of January the 6th, 2021. And I wanted to get it finished because I wanted to watch um what I thought was going to be the peaceful transfer of
Yeah.
power from Trump to Biden, administered by the Vice President Mike Pence. And so I just sent off the final version, which came out the following weekend. And then I sat and I watched, like many other people did, I watched January the 6th live on TV for the rest of that whole day. And sure, I mean, there's a weird set of resonances back and forth. And I think in many ways you could say that Bowie is, for Bowie, the world is a world of trumpery. I mean, it's a world of unreality, and that's the landscape that we get particularly in albums like Diamond Dogs, which
Yeah.
has a special place in my heart, and 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 then and that's also Trump's world, right? That
Yeah.
it's that unreality which is Trump's world. And so how do we distinguish, say, Bowie from Trump? And I think you can say with someone like Trump, there is illusion, there's fakery, there's trumpery, in the sense of deception, and it is a kind of a dead illusion, a decayed reality, American carnage, or whatever version of that we use, with vile bodies as well. And I think against that, what Bowie does is to produce it's an illusion against that illusion. It's a counter movement of the imagination, which is also an illusion against that illusion. And so I think it's not that I mean, Bowie's relationship to what we now think of as sort of mainstream liberal politics, I think, was always, it's hard to figure out. And in a sense, the scenario of his world is a world of carnage and fakery and things falling apart. But what he offers, and what Trump definitely doesn't offer, is a counter movement of the imagination, a pushing back against that unreal reality with a new, if you like, true illusion, or an illusion which is able to resonate with us. And Trump most definitely does not do that.
But you have to dig deep with Bowie to find the positive vision. Like you said, a lot of the pictures he paints is of societal deconstruction or hellscapes, or
Yeah.
even late into his work. Black Star is not an. I mean, I think it's a piece of genius, but it's not an uplifting, feel good album.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Or
I think
going back,
that's right. I mean,
you know,
think about that line. That's also from, I can't give everything away, seeing more and feeling less,
yes,
saying no but meaning yes. This is all I ever meant. That's the message that I sent. Saying no but meaning yes. This is all I ever meant. That's the message that I sent. So in a sense, Bowie's work is no.
right,
But what he means is yes. And so there is an affirmation wrapped up in that negation in Bowie. And I think it's important to remember that. I think but he's not someone who is in the business of offering reassurance about the state of things. The state of things is dreadful and has just got an awful lot worse. And song after song kind of explores that landscape. But
Yeah.
you're also, I think there's some themes I picked up in Bowie in the book were themes of yearning. There's a tremendous yearning in Bowie's work, which often turns around a memory. There's a track called, what is it called? 515, or it's a track called Survive from
Yeah.
Hours, track from Heathen. Well, in a sense, there's a memory of something wonderful, and it's being recalled in solitude. But what's being articulated there is a yearning, a desire for connection, for love. And then I think his work is always poised around a contradiction, that a song like Rock and Roll Suicide is, the line that gets people is, oh no, love, you're not alone, right? And you're wonderful. So and that's only through negation that you can get that. I mean, the idea that uh, you can just, affirm things as they are and things are going to be okay or something like that it's just not Bowie's universe. So with Bowie, we have to go through the long labor of negation and looking at reality in the face, finding it unreal, and then not just seeing that with a kind of ironic disdain or superiority, which is what makes him different from someone, say, like Warhol and a lot of other musicians. For Bowie, there's a deep, yearning, desire, a longing for love, for connection. And I think it's also, although I didn't really talk about this in the book, but I think it's there's a religiosity to Bowie, which
Sure.
certainly doesn't have a denominational name, but it's certainly that yearning, that desire, that negation of everything in order to open yourself to something else. I think is one way of thinking about what religion does at its best.
There's the yearning. You point out many examples throughout his whole catalog of expressing, contemplating yearning, but there's very few examples where he gets what he's yearning for. You mentioned
Yeah,
"Survive," that great line, "You're the great mistake I never made," right?
you're the
So it's
great mistake I never made. Yeah,
yeah. Um, so the maybe one or two exceptions I think of are among his sappier songs, like the wedding song
right.
off of Black Tie White Noise, or Kooks off of Hunky Dory. Those
Yeah,
are. So what is it about what it makes me think of is the pursuit of happiness is different than happiness. Like the yearning,
right.
striving is where the meaning's at.
Yeah, I think a happy Bowie is, I mean, who knows? I mean, it's the wedding song is not my favorite Bowie song, and that album, Black Tie White Noise, you can see him finding his way back. He's slowly finding his way back. There's great things on it, like that track Jump, I think,
Yes.
which is terrific, which is about, his half brother's suicide. And there's a lot to say about that, in terms of how that forms the young David Jones. But I think it's uh I think he was, there's something about the not the misery of what Bowie is to, but this is a bleak, cold world, a world of dead illusion, and where promises have not been kept and things have fallen apart. And against that, we can, against that, there are the songs and the feeling that the songs generate, which is the feeling of, I think of that moment in uh, which is kind of my, entry point with Bowie. But the Todd Haynes film Velvet Goldmine,
Yes, great
where
movie.
Bowie, yeah, great movie, and Bowie
Yeah.
didn't allow any of his music to be used, which is interesting. That the estate seems to have loosened up in since his death, but I can see why he didn't allow the music. But obviously, it's about him. But then there's this moment when the Bowie figure appears on television, and then the young, is it Christian Bale, the
Yeah,
actor?
that's
Um,
me. That's me.
that's me, and
Yeah.
that was the case. That sense in
Yeah.
which, there's another freak too. There's another weirdo. Uh, I am like that, and I think I felt that watching Bowie in, Top of the Pops in 1972, and that's kind of, for many Bowie fans, that was kind of the ground zero moment of seeing this character and thinking, yep, that's me. So the sense of connection, I think, is really, really strong in Bowie, and the and and the intimacy of that for how he was able to do this, I don't know. But the the address of Bowie's work, it always seems to me, is kind of one to one. It's from him, this person that writes these songs, to an audience which is composed of individuals who are not particularly happy, and and it's there's an intimacy of address in Bowie, which is, it's not the same as the address of the Rolling Stones or something like that, or
Mm.
even the Beatles, where you've got a band or you've got a group. Bowie, it's very much, it's him speaking to you, and those words resonating in your soul, and thinking, yes, that is how it is, and that is who I am. And how he's able to do that, Lord only knows. And he obviously tried with band structures, Tin Machine, and so with varying levels of success, in the Spiders from Mars. But in a sense, there is something solitary about the experience of Bowie, and the way Bowie speaks to his fans, which is also incredibly, you know, not liberating is the wrong word, but a thing which is often no, concern me, is that the right way of putting it? I've often wondered, how is pop music going to survive 50 years from now? And how's it going to, is it just going to be forgotten because it's not high culture, or what? And I think, Bowie's death answers that very decisively, that Bowie's music, and hopefully a lot of other people's music as well, but Bowie's music will be remembered because it speaks in that level of intimate address to people like me, who can say,
Mm.
well, I was there watching Top of the Pops in 1972, and it can speak equally to a 17-year-old in Wisconsin or whatever, who is perhaps has questions about who they are, and it can address that person in the same way. So I think the way in which Bowie fans have crossed, a transgenerational and very much trans people in many ways, I think is really important. And it also means that it will Bowie's work has survived and will survive its the context of its emergence, and I think that will become less and less relevant. Uh, you know, uh, but the music will live, and that makes me blissfully happy that in long after I'm dead, people are going to be listening to Bowie, and that's great.
Yeah. Well, that is a an optimistic point. Maybe to wrap this up, you've been very generous with your time, and I feel like I could talk to you for hours and hours. But I'm
No, it's well, I'm yeah, it's
you
good
have
fun.
more time.
Yeah, sure,
Oh, great, terrific. I'll keep going then. I want to
keep
be
going.
respectful. Great. So um, let me go back to um, the chapter that made me think of you, where
Okay.
you're talking about artifice. And the playing a part in your own movie, and you
Hmm.
mentioned in that that Bowie recognized he has that line in the song "Quicksand"
Right.
about Himmler's about Himmler and
Yeah.
his dream of his sacred dream of reality. I'm getting the line
Hmm.
wrong, but
Yeah.
your point
Sacred realm of dream reality.
about sacred realm of dream reality. Your point was that he Bowie recognized that Nazism was political artifice,
Yeah.
and so that's also part of why I was thinking of Trump. But why do you think he chose Himmler, not Goebbels or Hitler or Leni Riefenstahl or Albert Speer, who were all more involved with creating that artifice? I think of Himmler as the executioner, as the less
Hmm.
involved with the showmanship and more involved with the killing.
That's
Uh,
true, actually. Yeah. It should
yeah,
be. I mean, Goebbels would make more sense. I mean, didn't Goebbels have a PhD in um with a study of romantic theater? I think it was,
I
and
didn't know that. Yeah,
I think so. And so yeah, I think it's yeah, why him? I don't know. At least it wasn't Hitler. Maybe originally the line was portraying Hitler's sacred realm of true reality, and he thought that's going a bit far. I'll uh I'll pull that back. But the idea, I mean, yeah, at this point in uh Bowie's work, he, he's deep into esoteric uh wisdom. There's this connection with whatever he thinks of as Buddhism, which is not really clear, but it's there. And Aleister Crowley is clearly someone
yeah,
who's on his mind, but also Bowie is still a very young fellow, and but I think it's the idea of you know of quicksand in quicksand of the uh, that what the what the Nazis, what National Socialism did, um, not yeah, let's say what National Socialism does first is to really construct politics as a film, as a cinematic device. I mean, the Nazis were hugely aware of what had happened in German cinema in the 1920s, which of course was hotbed of experiment and expressionism, and also what was happening in the United States. So in a sense, the National Socialism from the very beginning is a movie. Um, and there's uh, that line I think I used in the book about Hans-Jürgen Superberg, which was Hitler, ein Film aus Deutschland, a film out of Germany, and in a sense that Hitler as the first pop star, or again,
yeah,
we could think about that in relation to Trump as a kind of pop star, and certainly that's there is a line from people like Mussolini to Hitler to Trump, where in a sense that the persona is all, and people are um, desperate to find some connection with that. I think what's hard to explain. It's what's hard to explain, say sociologically, in say National Socialism in the 1930s was the kind of the popularity of Hitler, the Hitler cult, and it was incredibly strong. And it was not being motivated by ideologues necessarily. It was just something people felt this connection to this figure. And something like that is going on with Trump for sure. Something of that is going on with Taylor Swift too. That it's just about, you know, the Eras tour and then the movie of the Eras tour. It's about bearing witness to that cinematic spectacle, that figure.
right.
And see Bowie's relationship to that, I think, um is tense, right? In the sense that he will provide an image. He realizes he's got to fill that space up with some image of himself, which he does brilliantly, but it's not him. It's not
Yeah, right.
it's not him. And it's And what he offers are just a series of illusions which are replaced, and then and who Bowie is in many ways is completely invisible. I don't think. I think the great thing about uh, Bowie, really the great thing about Bowie is how little we actually know about him.
Mm.
We know the image, we know nothing about the person, and he was able to exist in an extraordinary privacy, and most importantly, to die in an extraordinary chosen privacy, and to die with a dignity which is really rare with pop stars, with figures like major cultural figures, and also to do that, around what was arguably his most important, album for 20, 30 years, Black Star, depending on how we think about that. But that sense in which Bowie's Bowie's death as a death in complete privacy, and then he gives us this album, Black Star, which is all about death. And that's what you get. That's the living illusion that you get. And we feel we know him without knowing him at all. I think one of the great puzzles of music is we feel that we have a personal connection to people through their music, but we know at another level that we don't. We know nothing about Bob Dylan through listening to Bob Dylan's music, but we feel as if there's a connection there. And I think the people that buy the authenticity, as it were, get the authenticity, you know, infection, uh, satisfy that need. They make their life and their work kind of integrated into some idea of goodness. You know, Taylor Swift as a good example of that. She wants people to think well of her. She wants to be a good girl, and I think there's something she misses the point of what it is to occupy that space. Um, I think yeah. So I think Bowie is we know very little about him, and and hopefully we will continue to know little about him. And also the movie. What do you think of the movie Moonage Daydream? What was your opinion of that?
So I've watched that maybe three times,
I
and
saw it
I
twice.
yeah, because my reaction has been different each time, and
Uh-huh.
I'll watch it a few more times. I think the first time I watched it, I think wanting more of a narrative
Mm-hmm.
um, type of movie, and the second time I just sort of went with the sounds and the sights
Yeah.
because the stimulus, I think it's terrific. And then the third time, it was after reading many reviews and just sort of having exposure to other people's thoughts about this as like a great movie. And I was
Mm-hmm.
trying to see it that way. I don't know that I think it's the great Bowie movie. I think that, well, Velvet Goldmine, I actually think is a better movie. It's almost a better documentary, even though it deviates wildly from history, right?
Yeah, and he's not in it. He's not in it, and none of his music is in it, which is kind of
Yeah,
perfect. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. No, I thought that gave Todd Haynes a license to,
Mm-hmm.
don't be constrained by history to tell the story that you want to tell. But Bowie's music, I mean, Bowie invites us to bring our own meaning to his ambiguous lyrics, and
Precisely,
you
precisely.
know that sense that you're talking about, that it's speaking to me. It's
Mm-hmm.
probably speaking to you in a way that's different than it's speaking to me, because he's not
Mm-hmm.
telling us what to think.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, I think that's a good point. I thought Moonage Daydream was. I saw it with a couple of friends the first time, and I must confess I was disappointed. I found it was almost too much. There was too much editing. There was too many things going on, and I saw it again, and I think I thought better of it, but still, it was as if it was trying too hard. It was trying
Yeah,
to push things too hard, and I think I mean, Velvet Goldmine is one thing, but the other, I think Bowie's other great movie is The Man Who Fell to Earth, or The Man Who Fell to Bits, as we used to call it. back in the day. The Man Who Fell to Earth, because there, he's kind of playing himself in his coked out late Los Angeles moment, but he's also playing Thomas Jerome Newton, and I think it's a perfect film, him as the alien and so on and so forth. And I think it was extremely peculiar. Well, not peculiar is the wrong word. It was extremely interesting that, when there was word of him doing this theatre piece, Lazarus, that he goes back to the Thomas Jerome Newton story,
Yeah.
and picks it up sometime later. And I saw that show in New York twice, once in preview and once after it opened. And it, it's not perfect by any means, but it's interesting that he chooses to tell that story through the persona of Thomas Jerome Newton. And it's about him, but it's not about him. It tells us nothing about Bowie,
Yeah.
but somehow he finds in that character a character who doesn't die, doesn't age, something about him. So in a sense, his physical body is gone. Bowie is, died, cremated, whatever, but this continues to live. And why choose Lazarus? Why that image at the end, the image of the resurrection? I mean, the one act of resurrection that Jesus does in the Gospels, I believe, and which itself is such a strange event. I mean, uh, Lazarus didn't ask to be resurrected,
Right.
but Jesus had been hanging out with I think his sisters or one of his sisters and a friend, and then um, Lazarus is dead. Will you please come back? And then there he is, and he's at the entrance to the cave, and he's alive with bandages around his body. He's been embalmed, and I think that the use of those images in the final in the Black Star video, but also in the Lazarus video of the bandages around the eyes, and I think it's very suggestive, very powerful, and he's playing there with the image of his resurrected body. It seems to me he knows he's going to die, since he's already dead, and he will live on in this form as a kind of Thomas Jerome Newton character. I find that very interesting. So in a sense, he's already kind of prefiguring his afterlife.
He's going to live on in the form of the images and the songs and the sounds that he's leaving.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and that's gonna change. I mean, it's which is great, because there's so much to go back to, and a lot of the. I mean, I'm also interested in what the Bowie estate has been doing, the amount of material that has been produced in the last few years, and some of it is really, really interesting. And I think there's a lot more that's going to be revealed, but there's something about the perfection of the albums. And I guess you asked me, but you didn't ask me. It's in the notes that you
Yeah.
sent me, but which of his personae would you
Yes.
want to be?
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's always been the
Yeah.
Berlin period, because what he found there was a extraordinary anonymity, and he was able to go about his business. I remember about 2 years ago, I was in Berlin, and a couple of friends of mine had moved to Berlin, and they took me to the place where Bowie had lived. There's a little plaque. There's a couple of grammatical errors in the plaque, but we took photographs of each other in front of it, and then we went to a bar, which apparently was a bar that Bowie used to frequent in those years. And I was talking about Bowie in very bad German to the woman that ran the bar, and I couldn't quite figure out what she was saying, but she was possibly old enough to have served him a beer or a glass of wine at the time. But I think those years where in a sense, he's been through he's been through the ringer. In a sense, he could very easily have died in 75 or 76. And then, instead we get this extraordinary, creative burst of Low, Heroes, and Lodger, which is an album I've had to revise my opinions about the importance of Lodger. I think it is a really great piece of music. But that would be the period when it says Bowie is able to just not really be there. He's more or less absent. He's given up his pop stardom and he's just making music, writing songs, which is what he does well. You ever seen that footage of him in the studio? This would have been either in New York or Philadelphia when he's there's one video of him sort of coaching Luther Vandross and the other background singers on Young Americans, but there's another bit of video where he's in the kind of he's in the producer's studio, I think, and he's got his knees up to his chest. And he's just listening to
And
songs. He's just listening
people.
Yeah, and he's really, and you get that intensity of concentration. I think the thing about Bowie that has to be emphasized is his intelligence, the sheer intelligence of the person, and the rapidity of his mind and his ability to read situations and understand them. Another thing that I looked at recently, it flashed across something on my phone, was that interview I've seen a whole number of times with Jeremy Paxman, who used to be the host of the Newsnight show in the UK, 10:30 every weekday night. It's a very important show, and Paxman is interviewing Bowie about this new thing called the internet, and Paxman saying, well, it's just a tool. It's just it's a tool. It's like a typewriter. It says, no. And Bowie says, no, we haven't even begun to see the top of this iceberg. We haven't even begun to grasp that this is going to level everything and completely transform the relationship between producers and consumers of culture in every medium, right? Bowie grasped that very early on, that the internet would level everything. Right. And indeed it has. It's demolished, I think, every area of culture I'm aware of has been destroyed by the internet. And I think and Bowie saw that very, very early on. And and if Bowie were 21 now, he certainly wouldn't be in a band. He wouldn't be writing songs. He'd be doing something else. Quite what? I don't know. But he occupies the role of pop star because that's the role that made the most sense, had the most impact in that period. But that has decisively, completely ended. Which also strangely works to Bowie's advantage, that people's experience of music has transformed. I'm reading a little bit. I read a little bit recently about acid house and the rise and the changing nature of dance music between the mid 80s and the mid 90s, which is a fascinating story. And but this was a social experience. You needed to go to these clubs to hear these tracks, to hear the music, Frankie Knuckles, whoever it was, and then you couldn't hear that music. It wasn't released on record. You could maybe pick it up on some pirate stations, and then you go back to that club and listen to more music, which was the only place you could hear that music. And it was something you did with other people, and you're all a bit high at the same time. And that's all very nice. But and what's happened to music is that music has become a completely privatized, individualized experience. So you can sit there, or I can sit there now and listen to acid house on my own with my headphones on in the office. Right. And have some nostalgic memory of, well, what it would have been like to be in that room. But that's gone. And the win for Bowie in that in that the way in which music has transformed, degraded, decayed, but transformed, is that people listen to Bowie on their own, and in a sense, that's always the way it was meant to be listened to.
Yeah.
So in a sense, he's the ever increasing popularity of Bowie has moved with the transformation of the medium itself, which is really interesting.
Do you think that it makes a difference that it all exists at once now? That you can not just listen to it on your own, but you don't have to wait for the next thing. If you don't like tonight, you could skip ahead to
Yeah.
one out, right? And then you could go back in time, right? It all exists alongside each other.
Yeah, I mean, it's different ways of consuming music. I mean, I grew up with the album as the long playing record as form, and the constraints, 40 minutes or so of music, and within that constraint, wonderful things were possible. And so I still think about um, Bowie's records as album units, and the flow of,
Right.
say, side one of Low, or of side one of Heroes, which for me is
Yeah.
one of my, I mean, that flow of those 5 tracks on the first side of Heroes, I think really is one of the real high points for me. So
How
when
could
that's
it
just,
be different, right? I mean, it would be a different piece of art
yeah,
if the order was different.
right. So, but that's just gone. So people will consume it
Yeah.
as they consume it. They'll consume it, tune by tune, and then they'll listen to a track and they'll be pushed onto a playlist when, yeah. But I think there's also, I think, what we have now in music consumption, is, extraordinary nostalgia. I mean, I think
Mhm.
the return of vinyl, the certainly with a lot of people that are young people that I teach, I guess most of, I used to ask myself the question, what are students for? And students are for giving you music to listen to. That was the case until about 8, 9 years ago, that they were conduits to something, whatever was new. And I would always follow their tips and then go and find things and listen to them. But that has also changed. Kids are listening to music that was recorded 70 years ago, 50 years ago, and that's kind of bizarre and strange. It would have
I
been like
sometimes
me.
think when I see something like Ziggy Stardust is 50 years old, it still sounds dangerous.
Hmm.
Whereas I don't think I would have thought of Al Jolson that way
No,
in the early 70s.
no, no.
Yeah.
Or the Glenn Miller Band or something.
Right.
No, that would have been the music your parents or grandparents listened to, and that's fine. My mother was a big Sinatra fan, and nothing wrong with that. But the sense in which we have the archive of popular music, and there it is on the various streaming platforms, and then new things will be added to that, but then people will be going back and forth. So there's this, I mean, it's terrible what's happened to music, really terrible, in the sense in which artists can't make a living unless you're really, really big. So that's horrendous. So the whole phenomenon of the middle class musician with a band has just gone. On the other hand, there is this extraordinary literacy that young people have with regard to music. They can pick and select and find what's cool and concoct new playlists, new forms, and that's great. And if Bowie's in that mix, as he often is, then so much
Yeah.
the better.
There's something I do on my blog every Monday. I choose a cover of the week, which
Okay.
I select amongst covers that were posted onto YouTube within the previous week.
All
And
right.
part of what I'm trying to do with that is, some of what we've talked about, how his music is living on and being reinterpreted and being expressed with, meaning that's infused by the artist. And I'm bringing this up as by way of a little bit of pushback, because I'm impressed that there's an endless well of musicians or artists or bands that I
Yeah.
will never know about other than through this exercise. And I've never at a loss to actually select, like in my own mind, it's a competition. which is the best cover of the week.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
right. So there's a kind of a democratization of music.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. I mean, to mercilessly plug my own stuff, we did a cover of, and this does connect to Trump, is that in, gosh, when was this? It was early, let me try and get this right. It was, I think, 2017. Yeah, Trump was in office, and me and my friend John Simmons decided to do a cover of Bowie's Candidate from
Yes.
Diamond Dogs, and we put that out, and then it's out again as a track now called "If You Want It, Boys." But the context there was I took the line, "I'll make you a deal," which is the first line of Candidate, and I just began to repeat that, and obviously the Trumpian echoes there are, the art of the deal, that everything is a deal, and yeah, that was my one attempt at a cover, which is it's all right. I mean, it serves a purpose, and it's gets me out of the house.
I'm giving you fair warning. I'm gonna post that on my blog.
Okay, please do. Maybe
But
someone will listen to it.
that song has, you mentioned in your book that I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but that the music of Bowie has helped you structure your life,
Yeah.
and that just jumped out at me because it's done the same for me. And
Hmm.
a few years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, when my life was in upheaval, I was listening to Diamond Dogs over and over and over again. And I was finding meaning in that song and that phrase that
Hmm.
he wrote it 50 years ago, so he wasn't thinking about my situation. But I think that illustrates the almost the utility of Bowie's music.
Yeah. Oh, I completely agree. It's
Mm.
the everything for me has flowed uh from Bowie, and I ended up teaching philosophy and writing books, but everything goes back to the world that someone like Bowie opened up for me,
Yeah,
and that creative nothing, that possibility that um, you can hear in his music, and it gives you license, it gives you permission to do something of your own. So this is where, yeah, the covers do make sense, that
yeah,
Bowie gave people license to do their own thing. Um, and it's so I was very happy to write it wasn't a book, I was writing something. It wasn't clear what. And then this is a funny story and then I guess I should go and get some lunch. The, 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 a really close friend of mine in New York is a guy called Colin, who we share a football team, Liverpool Football Club, in common. And we were talking about, we're doing kind of a season end review somewhere in here. And, there's a little gap in the conversation. I said, "What are you doing now?" So, well, I'm sort of thinking about writing something about Bowie. I don't quite know what. And I'd seen the Victoria and Albert Museum show David
yeah,
Bowie is,
yeah,
and I was trying to make sense of the next day, and so on and so forth. And then um, I wrote this essay, which was basically one part was biography, and the other part was on the music. And I gave it to Colin, and he said, "Well, that's great, but what if you just broke all that down? What if you just, if you use the kind of cut up technique with it, and you took bits of the biography and bits of the music, and you just kind of broke them up into a different form?" So I printed out a hard copy of what I had, and I began to shove pages around, and then found these weird counterpoints between different bits of text, and thought, well, that actually, I don't need to tell the story of Bowie's music. I can just, jump around episodically from thing to thing, and that then gave the book its form. And then I wrote and filled in the gaps, and then he died. and then I wrote 4 little chapters on the on Black Star at the end. But the yeah, but that, that in a sense cut up as a technique is something that
Yeah.
I've used throughout, and that wasn't because of Burroughs and Brian Geisen. That was because of Bowie and the way in which he was able to kind of use that to distill an image, which resonates with you. I think that's what Bowie, how he's able to do that, I don't know, but he can distill something which is inherently ambiguous, as you say, but it's able to resonate with you in this incredibly powerful way, and you can then take that through your life, and things do then make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you, John.
Let me close with one quick question, the most superficial possible question.
Okay.
What's your favorite Bowie album and song?
I think my favorite Bowie album is side one of Heroes.
Yeah.
I mean, particularly Beauty and the Beast, Joe the Lion, and Blackout. Those songs, whatever he was doing then, and it's that kind of fusion of he's got that proper kind of African American backing band, Carlos Alomar doing his tricks. He's got a proper funky outfit, and and Eno doing his prepared this and that, and then bringing in Robert Fripp. Whatever that album, it achieves something at the level of form, which it leaves me breathless every time I hear it. And then so I'd say side one of Heroes. The actual track Heroes, in a sense, I could take or leave. It means a lot to a lot of people, and it's beautiful and wonderful, but it's the tracks around it that I really love.
Yeah.
And The Secret Life of Arabia on the end of side 2.
Yeah.
Love that song.
Yeah.
What on earth does that mean? What is The Secret Life of Arabia? I've got no idea.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole other topic of discussion.
That's another topic for another time.
Thank you. You've been terrific. You've given me more than an hour, and it's been
you're very welcome.
5 minutes. Hey, I don't live far from you. I live in Albany. If you're ever up here,
okay, I'll send you something. Actually, I'll send you a link to something.
Beautiful.